What's up, Gina?
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. All right. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do as a certified functional health coach.
Yeah. So our focus is functional health. So that's very much, I'm a functional health coach trained in functional nutrition. Also happen to be a certified yoga teacher, and have done a lot of that work. And then my husband, I own Lifestyle Evolution with my husband, Dr. Steve, and he is board certified in clinical nutrition. He's a doctor of health sciences and an ancestral diet and obesity researcher. And so for us, science is a very deep part of what we do and what we teach, and we take a whole foods approach and really not just digging into whole foods, but digging into lifestyle. So when we say ancestral, we mean the overall lifestyle of how we really evolved to live. And the people we serve are people who have a lot of weight to lose. So our typical client comes to us with at least 75 pounds to lose. We've also supported clients that have had 400 pounds to
Okay.
lose. And so not only are we managing weight loss, but we're managing chronic health conditions because, as you know, they come in tandem. No one
Hmm.
ever comes to us and says, that's my only issue. It's
Yeah,
always, and I'm struggling with, diabetes. I'm struggling with blood pressure, cholesterol, dysregulated metabolism and blood sugar and all of that. So it's a lot. We manage a lot with our clients, but we love what we do. We're very passionate about it.
that's awesome. So when you say ancestral
Yeah.
health approach, I've dived into the ancestral side of things with reading up and reading the books by Weston A. Price. And I believe his book was like Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. I think that was the book, and a
Yeah.
few others. But what is your approach with that? What does that mean? Because that could mean a thousand things. Is that Weston A. Price? Is that Liver King? Like people are probably thinking, oh, this is a Liver King person, which it's
Well,
not.
for us, when we say ancestral, we can't exactly match exactly how we ate back in the day because obviously food has changed and we now have genetically modified food. It's not as nutrient dense as it was, but we can mimic a very similar approach to food. And the reason for it, when we say ancestral, I'll put it in this perspective. If we look at the evolution of the human species as a football field, where we're living right now in this current lifetime that you and I are in, we are less than a fifth of an inch of the end of that field.
Gotcha.
So there's this massive process that happened before us. And during that evolution, we didn't have, and you can go back and there's lots of researchers and different anthropologists, paleontologists that have looked back at really the bones, the remains of our ancestors. And we didn't have, there were no signs of diabetes. And there was no signs of any of these common, that now are the majority of the people that live in this country are riddled with some kind of chronic illness, autoimmune condition, and 70% are overweight or obese. This didn't exist ancestrally when we look back. And the number one reason absolutely is what we were consuming. Because now we live in a country where when we talk about the standard American diet, what we mean is processed food. Is
Hmm.
we're eating food that we argue is not food. It's a food like substance, but it's not real food anymore. It's become something entirely different that our bodies don't process the same way as whole food. So whole food is a big part of what we talk about with ancestral, which does mean organ meats, which we can get into alternatives of how to get around that, but organ meats, nose to tail, truly the whole quality food. But then it's also lifestyle because if we also look at how we evolved, we're meant to move. We're meant to move our bodies every day. We're meant to have a sleep rhythm that's more in rhythm with our circadian rhythm, with the sun and darkness. That was, the sun came up, we woke up. The sun
Hmm.
went down, we went to bed. And then
Yep.
community too was a big part. We stayed in communities and we stayed with our family and our community. Now we live in a world where my family is spread across this whole country and some on other continents. So all of those factors of why are we so fascinated with it? I think so many people are fascinated because we were free of disease and free of all the common ailments that are so prevalent now. So there's something to be said. It's something that we need to go back and learn from our own history.
All right. So there's so many rabbit holes we could go down
Oh,
with
I
this.
know.
So I'm gonna pick the one my audience is more interested in than I am interested in.
Go for
So
it.
someone comes to you, they're struggling to lose weight, they have these health issues. Loaded question. Where do you start with this person?
The biggest thing, honestly, first step is just cleaning out the processed food. So it's not about, we don't have them count calories. We don't have them track macros. None of that's necessary, because if they're just eating whole food, and when I say whole food, I mean, actual protein and actual vegetables and fruit, not something that's in a shake form or a blended form or a processed down into a bread form, but just whole food, that alone is a massive, as I know you and your audience know, that is a massive shift.
Yes.
And we don't have to restrict anything, because if they're just focusing on those foods, they can eat in abundance. Clients always say to us on the front end, they're so afraid of being hungry and having all these cravings. And literally almost every client, a week or two in, they're like, I'm not hungry at all. And I'm not having any cravings at all. I'm like, because you're eating the food your body is desperately wanting you to eat, because it's how we're meant to eat and it's how we best support our health. So it's really, that's the first step, is once we do a very detailed health intake, and we make sure their nutrition template also addresses the health things. So it's whole food, but then if it's someone who's diabetic, their food list, everything above a 55 glycemic index is color coded in pink. If they have an autoimmune disease, everything that's a potential inflammatory food is highlighted in yellow. So we also address health conditions, but it's really just getting to whole food. And for a lot of people, that first step lasts a long time. Like, we don't have to make modifications usually for a while, because the weight will, when I say it's just coming off them like way faster than they've expected, it really is. Especially the more weight you have to lose coming to us, the faster it will come off in the first 30 to 60 days. That's always when you have the best momentum, is when you're first making that shift. Gotcha. So again, it's a big shift.
That's a big shift. So a lot of the clients I work with, they're moms. They tend to have like corporate jobs or government jobs. You tell them, hey, cut out this processed food, possibly stop going out to eat these whole foods. How do they kind of work that into their schedule? Because they're busy.
Yeah. Well, I'll preface that answer by saying I get it. I'm a mom, and I have two little ones that are 7 and 9. And my daughter, she's the 7-year-old. She has severe epilepsy. She has seizures every day, multiple times a day. She's nonverbal. She does not walk. I get it. And on top of that, I'm owning and running a business. And I came from the corporate world too. I was in corporate world for far too long, longer than I wish I'd been. So I do get it. And so one of the things that we talk, we have a lot of clients that are moms. And one of the things we talk about is rethinking how you see cooking. Because sometimes someone will say, I don't have time to cook. Then let's look at what you're cooking. Let's look at how you're attacking food, because I'm always sharing ideas with our group around simple meals that take less than 15 minutes. And that's less than 15 minutes to feed a family of 4 in our case. It's just rethinking. And it doesn't mean you can't eat out. I like that you mentioned like eating out and stuff, because what we really teach at the core is, for primary meals, you're picking a protein from your food list, you're picking a vegetable, you're picking a fat. Then there's also some limited dairy, some fruit, some things that you can eat more for snacking in between meals if you need them. But really protein, fat, and veggies. Anywhere you eat, literally anywhere. And I say this we were on a road trip last summer, and we were in this part of Texas where for miles, the only food was McDonald's and a gas station. Oh, geez. And we bring some food with us too, but we needed like meals. And even though I typically won't eat fast food, there were a couple times where we had to hit a McDonald's, and I just got something sans the bun, sans that carby processed piece, and to make the most of it, and try to get it as clean as possible. It may not be the quality that we're ideally shooting for, but you can get a protein, a vegetable, and a fat anywhere. And so we teach clients, because we have clients too that travel constantly for work, like those working moms that are in corporate America, and they're eating out 80% of the time. We guide them through that. So the choices we teach people to make can truly be made anywhere. But obviously when you're home, the beauty of cooking at home is you can truly control the quality of the ingredients, because ideally we want you staying away from industrial seed oils. We want you focusing on healthy fats. We want you as much as possible eating organic and grass fed. And there's very real reasons for why that's important. But we also know, being busy moms, it's, you got to keep it quick. So I'm the queen of teaching people quick recipes, because that is my world. I am never not crazy busy, but I cook all of our food here at home from scratch.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay. So they're busy. Their mom's, what would like a quick 15-minute meal look like? Like what's
Well,
off the top of your head?
totally. I'll throw one out that I literally just posted yesterday, and it's I got a flank steak and I put a quick rub on it, and it's really whatever rub you like. I have a ton in my cabinet. Sometimes I make them, but I put a quick rub on it and I cooked it off on my flat top. A flank steak can easily feed a family of 4. It can sometimes feed a family of 6, a good sized flank steak. And it takes less than 10 minutes to cook on a flat top because it's a thin piece of meat.
Right.
And then for the vegetable, I got some organic steam in a bag Brussels sprouts. I steamed them in the microwave in the bag for 2 minutes. And then I finish them off in cast iron. I'm a cast iron lover. I cook a lot.
Same.
Love it, love it. I had a whole set of cast iron. It's like they're my babies. And I threw them in cast iron to add a nice char with some avocado oil, salt, pepper, garlic, and a little bit of balsamic at the end for some acid. That whole meal took me less than 15 minutes. Super easy. And there's a lot of those things like steam in a bag veggies are one of my biggest go-tos, because like a steam in a bag broccoli, 3 minutes in the microwave, throw it in a bowl, drizzle olive oil, salt, pepper, garlic on it. Boom, you have a side veggie in less than 5 minutes. So it's just thinking a little bit differently, but also prepping extra. So when I cook a meal, I cook enough. There's 4 of us, but I'll cook enough for 8 people. And everyone teases me. Part of it's I'm Italian, and Italian and Polish, and we feed everybody like we're feeding an army. But I cook extra on purpose, because then the next night, my dinner's really quick. I just pull all the leftovers out from the night before, heat them up, and we're eating in a matter of a few minutes. So not only can the meals be quick, but if you plan for extra, you're setting yourself up for a second meal out of that.
I teach my clients the same thing. It's okay. You get the family pack of chicken or pork or beef, cook the whole thing up. Don't make that into multiple. Just cook all of it on the grill or in the oven.
Totally.
Done. There's your meal prep.
Yeah. It's easy. Instapot's Instapot is another thing I recommend a lot to people when they're busy, because I can throw a beautiful roast in my Instapot with some carrots, some onions, some other veggies, some bone broth, step away from it. And a couple hours later, I open it up and boom, I have a beautiful dinner ready to go. So it's just thinking differently. So when people say they don't have time, I immediately challenge it. I'm like, you have time. You just have to think about how you're using your time differently. We all can figure out how to cook it. And now if you don't have cooking skills, that's a different challenge.
Yes.
But we help with that too. We have clients that I'll help them with really simple stuff that even if they don't necessarily have cooking skills or cooking prowess, they can easily make some of the dishes that we recommend as well.
I think it's still on Netflix. I tell people to watch the Netflix series, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. There's also a book.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
That's a really good one, because it goes in like the basics of like how to make food taste really good. Now you have to adjust it to make it like healthier, but
salt
it's a
and
really
acid
great
is
start.
my biggie. I preach salt and acid. Every time someone's like, come over here and taste this pot of something I'm cooking, and before I even taste it, I'm like, it's going to need salt and acid every time.
Yep.
It's like those are the top 2 things people are missing in their food is salt and acid.
Especially American. Like everyone's been told, lower the salt. And then the best analogy is like, why does everyone love cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving? It's like, it's the only acid on the table.
Yes, it is. That's why, because I'm not usually a cranberry person, but man, with the Thanksgiving meal, it's the perfect addition because you need acid. Absolutely.
Yeah. It makes,
I'm a biggie on that.
Ever since watching that, and I read her book. So there's a book for those of you who just like reading the books, an audiobook. It just totally changes. Like, oh, this is why some of my meals are like amazing, and other ones it's like, what is this thing missing in here? It's like, oh, as soon as you figure that out, salt and acid, every meal tastes good now.
100%. So I always tell people keep vinegar and citrus fruit. Like it's either getting lemon, lime, or one of the copious amounts of vinegar. I have lots of vinegars in my house.
We do too. Our daughter is obsessed with balsamic. She puts it on everything.
I love balsamic.
So I think we have like 10 or 12 different bottles of balsamic, like the different flavored kinds. And then all the like sherry and red wine and white wine. Like there's so many vinegars. It's hard to keep track of in our house, but it makes everything taste good. Yeah. It's fun.
And different things are better with different vinegars. Like you can't, and that's sometimes you have to learn that with time, but yeah, there's different vinegars that are my go-to depending on what I'm making, what kind of protein, what kind of veggies, but yeah. And the salt thing, I love that we were talking about salt too, because that's almost everyone that works with us. It's been drilled into them that they have to cut back on salt. And I'm like, nope, start salting your food and start salting it generously. It is an extremely vital electrolyte in our bodies. A lot of people actually interested are deficient in sodium. Even if they have high blood pressure, we don't want them worrying about how they're salting food, because their blood pressure is going to come down the minute they stop eating processed carbohydrates. Their blood pressure always comes down. So we always tell our clients, salt generously. It's key.
Yes.
Well, I
Okay.
like that you're thinking the same way here, Chris.
Yep. I have a ridiculous. I mean, I basically like do a DIY the Element electrolyte packets. I'm sure you're familiar. I do my own DIY, so it's like a gram of salt to start the day off. That's how I start every day off, not including all the other salt I put on food. So,
Yeah.
and if I'm out working in the yard or I'm in the garden for a long, like this weekend, when we're recording this, I have to go and work on the food plot for hunting season when it's going to be like the hottest it's been for a little while. And that's all hand tools. So I'm going to be in there for 4 hours sweating electrolytes. So I'm going to be a gram or two of salt there. So yeah, I use a lot of salt.
Yeah, I'm a big salt person too. And then we get, I don't know if you've heard of LMNT,
Yeah.
or electrolyte, but I love their stuff because it doesn't have a lot of electrolyte mixes are full of just all kinds of other stuff that really has no purpose in it,
Yes.
and so I like theirs because it's just the flavored salts, and I do that a lot in the morning. I grab a huge mason jar, put a pack of that in it, fill it up all the way. And not only am I starting my day with a lot of water, which is something we recommend, but I'm starting off knowing I've got my electrolytes in check before I dive into my day.
Watermelon flavor is my favorite one.
Oh, me
But
too.
surprisingly, I liked all of them, including the chocolate.
Yeah. One
Like,
of my clients puts the chocolate in her coffee.
well, after I finished my sample packet of it,
Yeah.
somebody did like a hot chocolate with it. I was like,
Ooh.
oh, that makes so much sense. It was like then like
Um,
the picture was like someone hiking and having it there. I was like, oh, hot coffee or like as a hot chocolate. That's what you would use it for.
like
Duh.
it makes sense. Like it's a little weirder in the water, but it makes sense in like, yeah, like a coffee or a cocoa,
Yeah.
or I also
It,
like the grapefruit is the other one I really like too.
I'm gonna
Watermelon. I
try
think
that one.
I don't know if it's new, but I just got like a huge box of watermelon and a huge box of grapefruit that are on the way. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of that. Anyone who's struggling with their water intake, I usually have them increasing their electrolytes to help with that. But
Yes.
all right. So you mentioned some processed carbohydrates. So obviously those are everywhere in
Mm-hmm.
our society, in our food system.
Yeah.
How do you help clients manage that? It's kind of a loaded question, but what's the process of removing it or like having a strategy around those kind of foods?
Yeah. Well, we definitely go, it's a cold turkey, hard stop when people come
Okay.
into the program. And it's funny because I was in this interview a couple of weeks ago and this guy cracked me up. He goes, "So do you actually get people to agree to that before they sign on to it?" Yes, they come in fully knowing we're completely upfront about what our approach is, because not everybody is ready to make that change. But the majority of the people we serve, because they've struggled with obesity so long and they struggle with chronic illness for so long, they know enough. They know all that other stuff out there doesn't work. The Weight Watchers, the Optivias, the Nutrisystems, the Jenny Craig's, you name them, right? All these programs are working for them. So they're like, I'm willing to try anything at this point. So they come into it knowing. Doesn't mean they're not a little worried, because in their minds, they think they're going to be, like I said before, they're going to be starving and they think they're going to have constant cravings for these foods. But the interesting thing about cravings is you can't break a craving cycle for sugar if you don't stop eating sugar. Else you'll always crave it if that's kind of your propensity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ask people in the beginning to come in with an experimental mindset. That's a big thing we talk about on the front end. Is we're not saying that those foods will never pass your lips again. Just come into this process with an open mind, be willing to learn, and see how your body responds. So if the minute you get them in that thinking of, okay, this might not be forever, like they immediately kind of feel a little less anxious about it because it doesn't feel as rigid, but then
Gotcha.
when they come in, we try to get them to be creative about, substitutions are hard because a lot of the substitutions that people recommend in the world of health and wellness are also processed.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you could argue, a processed piece of Wonder Bread is not the same as a processed piece of Ezekiel bread that comes from sprouted grains, right? You can argue that they're very different, But the fact is, when we're talking about weight loss and inflammation, processed is processed, and it causes inflammation in the body. And it is already, it's like eating food that's already digested. It's already been, all the stuff your body has to do to break it down, it's already broken down. So it goes through you so quickly, right? So normally, if they can come into it with the experimental mindset, and we can give them some ideas for substitutions, like cauliflower rice, which I know everybody's probably sick of hearing about cauliflower rice, but cauliflower rice, riced broccoli, they do rice broccoli too. A lot of times what people miss is the texture and the delivery method. It's not necessarily the specific, because if you really think about it, rice has no flavor.
No.
Pasta doesn't have some huge flavor. It's more that we're used to having that other thing. Like we want to twist our, I mean, I'm Italian. We want to like twist our fork, and get that big old thing of pasta wrapped around the fork. Well, you can do that with zucchini noodles, like there's options. But honestly, once people get through that first couple of weeks, they stop stressing about the fact that they're not eating those foods, because they feel better. They've got their hunger regulated. Their blood sugar very quickly starts to regulate. And then once they get all that sugar out of their bodies, they stop craving it. And we see it time and time again. And they never believe us that it's going to happen. And then it happens every time. And then they stop stressing about not having those things, because they realize their body feels good and feels better.
Nice. So basically what I'm kind of hearing is you take more of like a lower carb approach. Now, with the kind of clientele you're working with, 75 to 100 pounds, and probably diabetes or pre-diabetes, that kind of makes sense. Yeah. Is that kind of the approach you take with them?
Yeah, it's naturally going to be, when you get out all those processed carbs, it's naturally going to be lower carb, but I think sometimes what's good for listeners to realize too is, sometimes people will say, oh, so they don't eat any carbs. And I'm like, well, no, all plants, all fruits and vegetables have carbs, but it's a different carb. Carb is not a carb and a calorie is not a calorie. I'll argue that all day, and for carbs, for example, I'm going to use the blood pressure example that when I brought up earlier, a processed carbohydrate, and when I say sugar, I mean all processed carb. Bread is sugar to your body. Okay. It's just like sugar. So bread, pasta, muffins, candy, sugar, whatever. All those processed carbs hold up to 4 grams of water per gram of carbohydrate you consume. When you are not eating those carbs and you're getting your carbs instead from whole fruits and vegetables, they only hold 1 to 2 grams of water per gram of carbohydrate. And a lot of people don't realize that, because they're just taught, oh, the average is, it holds 3 grams of water. No, there's a major difference between if you're eating a slice of bread or if you're eating some Brussels sprouts. So what that does for blood pressure, for example, is imagine you're cutting the water volume that you're holding in half by removing those processed carbohydrates. And it's just like, using a pipe analogy, if we put half the amount of water through a pipe, we reduce the pressure of what's going through that pipe, because we reduce the volume of the fluid going through that pipe. It's the same with our bodies and with blood pressure. So it's the very first thing we see start to correct itself when people are working with us. And every client that's ever worked with us is off their blood pressure medication, usually within the first 3 months, because they don't need it anymore, because they're eating in a way that they no longer have an elevated blood pressure. They're naturally managing their blood pressure. So getting out those processed carbs is key. And yes, it's lower carb in as a whole, but man, you can eat more food. Like that's one of the things that clients were always surprised by, is they're eating a lot, because that processed food is very calorically dense. You take 200 calories of bread, that's not very much bread, but you take 200 calories of some veggies, that's a lot of veggies to get 200 calories. So they're eating, we're not telling them how much to eat. So they're eating, they don't feel hungry. They feel totally satiated, and they're just eating a different kind of carb. So yes, it is lower carb, but it's also the quality of the carb that makes the difference.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So this is a question from me, not the audience. How is it that you're only going to store 2 grams of water with a carb from a unprocessed source, say Brussels sprouts, like you used, versus a processed one? Because in my mind, what I've been taught is you eat 1 gram of carbohydrate, regardless of the source, it's going to be about that 4 grams of water that, when stored as glycogen, it stores.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, because that is what most people are taught, and that is what most people teach. But when you really look at the science of it, there is this delineation. But when we live in a culture like ours, where we eat a lot of processed carbs, we kind of just assume everybody's eating a lot of processed carbs. So we kind of just go with the higher number.
Gotcha.
But part of it is those kinds of carbs, again, they're highly processed, those carbohydrates. It's simply that your body biologically needs more water to take that carbohydrate and process it and move it through the body, expel whatever sugar has to be expelled and processed through, to go down to the liver. It takes more water to process that carbohydrate. It's just simply biology. The body needs more water. But when we get it in a whole form, that our body's like, okay, yeah, I know what to do with this. This is real food. We don't need as much water to process it because it's easier for our body to process real food than it is for our body to process processed
Gotcha.
food.
Is that because like most processed foods are obviously broken down, but also like dried and then stripped of most of the vitamins and minerals versus like if you eat Brussels sprouts, you're also going to eat water that's in that thing already, plus the
Yeah.
vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients and everything else. Is that kind of why that
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, that's actually part of it. I like that you said that is part of it too, because there's no real water volume in that processed food versus, like you said, all the natural water and everything that's in the vegetables and the fruits that we eat. So that plays a factor as well. And it's interesting to watch because even most doctors have little to no training in nutrition.
Right.
So they're always shocked when we'll have our client, we'll be like, you need to go see your doctor and have them look at your blood pressure medicine. And then they go to their doctor and they're like, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm not eating processed food. This is how I'm eating. And their doctors are always floored that their blood pressure. I mean, we had a guy come to us that had been on blood pressure medicine for a year and had never once in that year had a normal blood pressure reading while medicated, which is kind of crazy. I mean, at some point you should be able to get enough medication to get it down, but it's artificial. It's an artificial improvement, right? You're not really fixing the problem. You're treating the symptom, which is what conventional medicine does. And in 23 days of working with us, he started having normal blood pressure readings and they stayed normal. And after a full year of never having a normal blood pressure reading. And it was simply, we stripped out the sugar, we stripped out the processed carbs, and we got him eating whole food, and a lot of it's getting out hidden sugar too. Cause at first, he was like, well, I'm not eating this, but I'm drinking, my full sugar Gatorade and I'm drinking juice, which is a sugar bomb, so it was interesting. Like it was a lot of major shifts that this guy had to make. But once he realized he could completely manage it on his own, he's like, why would I ever go back to relying on a drug when I can do this myself? And that's
awesome.
the power we want to give people, right? Is every single person has the ability to take full control over their health simply from starting from a nutritional perspective. And then of course, adding in movement, stress management, quality sleep, all of that. But we have way more control over the state of our health than we think we do, because we live in a system that's made us dependent on drugs and procedures and doctors because we don't realize that we have the control ourselves. We just got to take it back.
Definitely. So with your approach, what kind of like what we would consider as carbs do you include in the diet, if any? So are like sweet potatoes, white potatoes, those included, or maybe they're down the road, like after people lose weight, then you add them in? Like what is your approach with that?
Well, in the beginning, even though we'll have things color coded that are higher glycemic, we try to get people to focus on things that are below 55 on the glycemic index.
Gotcha.
So they have less of an impact on blood sugar. Sweet potatoes are right at that number, actually, right at the 55. So sweet potatoes in the beginning, what we tell clients is yes, but be mindful of moderating, because the fact is it's still a starchier carb. We keep white potatoes out because they have a much higher glycemic index.
Gotcha.
Than sweet potatoes. But yeah, sweet potatoes and most of the starchy, because they're not eating a little bit of corn. They can have a little bit of corn in the beginning. The problem with corn is most of it's genetically modified. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down, GMO food, which I'm sure you've got some thoughts on too, knowing a little bit about you, but it's again, another very high sugar, high starch, so those things they're in there in moderation in the beginning, but then that gives us steps to take later, because then when they hit their first real plateau, then we make a modification. Like we only modify when their body really plateaus, because as long as they're still losing weight and as long as they're not really plateaued, there's no reason to make an adjustment. So we wait until a real plateau happens, and those are when we make modifications. So a first step might be, okay, if they're eating if they're say they're still eating nuts, because nuts are another carb source they can have in the
Mhm.
beginning. So let's say they're still eating nuts and sweet potatoes and corn. The very first modification we might make is let's just simply remove those few foods that have a higher carb load, and let's see what happens. And they'll start losing weight again. And then when they hit the next plateau, then we might say, okay, do you really need 2 snacks a day? Let's look at snacking, because snacking is something that most people just snack just because it's habit, not
Mhm.
because they're actually hungry. And whenever you snack between meals, your body is like, oh, you just gave me food, so I can stop using body fat. Our body can't use body fat as energy if we're constantly feeding it. So yeah, hopefully that answers the carb question, but those are the kind of the primary: sweet potatoes, corn, fruit, of course, like some of the fruits that are higher in carbs, and then some nuts in the beginning as well. The problem with nuts is most people don't really have an ability to modify nuts.
Uh,
Like I had a serving and there's like 30 nuts in the picture.
yeah.
Because what we do for food is they don't have to measure it or track it. They just have to send us a picture. And actually, a picture truly is worth 1,000 words, because if you send
Yeah.
us a picture of what you eat, we can see the portions. You don't need to tell us. We can see the kinds of choices you're making. But I love when someone's like, "Yeah, I had a serving of almonds, and there's like 30 almonds in the dish," and I'm like, "Oh no, 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 that's not a serving. Like you just ate like 4 servings."
That's I had a client years ago. It was like diet on paper, as I'm sure you've experienced this before, without any portions listed. Like on paper, you're like, this looks perfect. Like, how many almonds are you eating? And she's like, I think I eat an entire bag on like my commute, like because she was commuting. I was
Yeah,
like the snack bag. She's like, no. I was like, go get that bag. And she like sent me a text message the next day, like, that was 1,000 calories I was eating. It's like,
yeah,
wow, how many grams of fat, how many grams of carbs were you eating it? And she just cut that out.
yeah.
All of a sudden, weight's dropping. Like, there we go. Like,
It's a
you
big
were
one.
eating like 16 servings.
My husband jokes. My husband always says to the clients, he's like, it's a hiking food. It's a backpacking food. He's like, if you're really going to be like, like that, like gorp, right? Like making
Yeah.
homemade gorp when we used to be hardcore backpackers before we had kids, like there was a reason that was like our key food we ate throughout the time was dried fruit and nuts, because it was loaded with carbs, loaded also with some good protein and some other great things in those nuts. But it is not weight loss food. It's
No.
just, it
Well,
isn't. And in the beginning, we leave it in partly just because it makes people feel a little better in the beginning. And if they're losing weight, we're like, okay, we're not going to strip those out yet. But then the point comes where it's like, yeah, the nuts
that's
got to
gotta
go.
go.
And not forever. Again, like when we get to maintenance, it's a different conversation, and we still want them to stay away from processed food, because that's not just about weight loss. That's about inflammation and health overall in our bodies. But once you get to maintenance mode, then you can start bringing in some white potatoes. You can start having a little bit of rice. There's things that start to come in maintenance, but maintaining is so much easier than losing it.
Yes.
Losing is the hard part. And it's funny because sometimes people think maintenance is the hard part because they always gain it back. But that's just because they had a major lack of knowledge. Like no one ever really taught them anything. They
Mhm.
just followed some system that when they stopped following it, they didn't know what to do.
It falls apart.
Yeah, and everything falls apart. But the fact is maintenance is the easiest. That's the easiest part of this whole thing. It's losing it that's hard. Now, of course, gaining it's real easy. But
Yes.
losing it's the hard part. Yeah.
Okay. So things look a little different after you've lost weight, as
Yeah.
it should.
Yeah.
So you have more freedom with some of the food choices, because I find with a lot of times, and I'm sure you've experienced this with the clients, they've
Yeah.
lost their weight, they've done so many things, they've been chasing weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, and
Mhm.
maybe they've had some things they wanted to do. Maybe they've always wanted to run a 5K, or they want to compete in powerlifting. I've seen all this stuff over the years.
Totally.
And all of a sudden now they've gone from like, I'm a weight loss client, to almost more like a performance client. Like now I'm a runner, or I'm a
Yeah.
weightlifter, or I have this hobby now that I'm trying to fuel my body for. So
Yes.
you now add in the white potatoes and things to help fuel them, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. And it's all about timing. Even right now, we have a few clients that are in that last, even though most of our clients are 75 plus pounds, we always have a few that end up being referred in from other clients
Mm-hmm.
that are really excited about what we do. And they might only have 40 pounds to lose. Exercise can come into play a lot more when you're dealing with 40 pounds of weight loss. The problem with when someone has 200 pounds to lose, they're physically limited.
Mhm.
That's issue number one. Like we have clients who can barely walk. So we're certainly not trying to get them in the gym yet. The first thing we try to get people doing is either walking or swimming, like some kind of consistent movement that's low impact. But when you've got 200 pounds to lose, nutrition alone is going to be an insane shift in the beginning, and you're going to lose a ton of weight. But then the point comes where if you can start to bring exercise into the mix, especially exercising, and it can sound like anti what a lot of people think, but something that's not super high intensity when we're talking about fat loss, right? Because
Right.
high intensity it uses very minimal fat in the body. It's using glucose in the blood. It's trying to use blood sugar because it needs quick energy, right? So you get way more fat burning from walking, way more fat burning from walking. And then swimming's another good one too. So, but when you can bring exercise in, we have a couple clients right now that already have athletic backgrounds, and now it's already their propensity to be very physically active, but they're losing weight. So then it's about timing. And one of the things we talk about to people is we were just talking about this with our clients the other day on the live, is if you can go into that workout without eating, your body will maximize body fat usage because you haven't just put all this glucose into your blood. You don't have all this blood sugar to use. But then you also have this golden hour after you work out where what you're eating is needed for recovery. It's needed for replenishing the energy that's been used. So you don't store it. If you can eat within that first hour after exercise, you're not going to store any of it because your body needs it to recover. Right. So it's just teaching them to understand the timing of food and when to incorporate. So then maintenance, a big part of maintenance, I do believe it needs to be around movement, consistent movement. If you want to start bringing back in, because if you just say, I'm not going to really move, but now I'm going to start eating potatoes again. I'm going to start eating rice again. I'm going to eat more nuts again. I'm going to eat more high glycemic fruit again. You're going to start getting weight. I mean, that's inevitable. So movement is key to maintenance. If you're moving regularly, it's a lot easier to maintain weight loss. Movement has to be part of the plan.
I think that brings us back to the ancestral lifestyle of big
Yes.
thing would be movement.
And even in the morning, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, even in the morning when we talk about ancestral, like we wake up now and what is the very first thing we do? Maybe we might shower first, but then we come down and we eat and we drink. Like that's like the first thing we do. But ancestrally, we didn't have a refrigerator. We didn't wake up and go open the fridge and start eating. We had to forage, we had to hunt, we had to prepare food, right? And so we have this cortisol awakening response that we still have from evolution, right? That between roughly about 5 and 7 a.m., we get a spike in cortisol. And it's because our body is preparing us to use our body fat and our stored energy as fuel to start our day until we have food. So it's interesting. We still have that cortisol awakening response. We still have it, but we end up still just eating right away when we wake up, but it's not necessarily because we're hungry. It's because it's habit. That's what we do, right? We wake up, we make coffee, and we eat breakfast. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting, but we moved first thing as soon as we got up. Movement was the very first thing we did. And that's not, for most people, if people are moving at all, some people don't get any real movement in the day at all. And so, yeah, movement's an interesting one ancestrally.
Yeah, it would be lots and lots of steps every single day. And then I'm not sure, like when you work with someone in this fashion, but generally what I've read up would be, it might be 2, maybe 3 times a week of high intensity type of training, where it'd be like weightlifting or intervals or some sort. But it's like the rest of the time, it's much more that lower intensity stuff.
Well, and with us, a lot of our clients can't even do the high intensity, in the beginning for a while. So for a lot of our clients, that doesn't come into play for a while. It is more low intensity for sure. But yeah, consistent movement. I mean, period, just consistent movement. If you can just get up, and I'm thrilled if someone can walk for 15, 20 minutes a day. Like I'm thrilled because it's movement, and we can't be sedentary all day. It's on many levels that is problematic. And we see a very high propensity towards different disease states that are directly correlated to not moving our bodies, but also getting outdoors. And I know you're a big outdoor guy, as are we. We just went camping this past weekend, and the outdoors, we underestimate the power of being out in nature, being out in sunshine, being out getting fresh air and just disconnecting from all the rabbit holes we go down with technology. Like we just went camping this last week and it was a scouts trip. There was no Wi-Fi and no cell service. And I had multiple friends that were like, oh my God, there's no Wi-Fi and cell service. I'm like, I know, isn't that
It's
awesome?
great.
I was so excited. I was like, no one has a choice. Like everyone has to disconnect. It's crucial because our mental health is so heavily connected to our physical health. We can't keep those two things separate from one another. And we've lost this connection to nature. We've lost this connection to really being quiet with ourselves and just being
Mm-hmm.
outdoors. Like we're constantly full with social media and the news coming at us. And it's just this never ending stream of content and input. And it's exhausting. Like personally, I think it's exhausting. I avoid it as now as a business owner. Unfortunately, we can't avoid it completely,
Right.
but I avoid it as much as I can outside of my business because that is part of being healthy and having a healthy mindset and having a certain kind of lifestyle is getting up and moving and getting outside as much as possible.
Yeah. I have a whole training on like nature therapy and all the benefits of getting outside of the exercise aspect. Like even if you
Yes.
just go and sit on a bench in a park, it's like been shown to increase creativity, lower your blood pressure, lower your stress, like your cortisol levels, like so many benefits just getting outside. And I know like where I live, it's very suburban. And then a lot of people commute to the city. So it's like they're in the iron jungle and then they're back into the suburbs where it's like, yeah, you can get outside, but for me to get to a park, like I have to drive someplace to get to. So it's not just like walk right outside and okay, we're in nature.
Yeah. Well, and people say they don't have time. And gosh, that's one of the things I hear. I just hear I don't have time so much. And I always challenge people like, how much time do you spend watching Netflix?
Right.
You know, how much time do you spend playing some stupid game on your phone? You know, like when people say they don't have time, what it means is they don't have the right priorities,
Mm-hmm.
is really what that means. So when people say, I don't have time to cook, I don't have time to get movement in, you do. You do. And I say that again, I mean, I'm a crazy busy mom with a special needs daughter who's full-time care with us. And my life is never going to be what anyone else would consider normal or calm. Like people come to visit and they're like, oh my God, like this is what your world is like all the time. And I'm like, yeah, like to me, it's normal. But we still, as a family, we don't find the time, we make the time. Like we prioritize our disconnecting time. We prioritize our getting outdoor time. It's just a choice. Am I going to binge watch some show on TV? Am I going to play on my phone? Or am I going to grab my kids and go outside and go hit the park or go find a trail nearby? Or, it's priorities. We have time. I think we have an abundance of time. We just are filling it with things that don't serve us. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah. I find for people who say, I don't have time or I'm too busy, if they're not saying something after that, it's a bullshit response of
Yeah.
they're wasting too much time in the day. There are people who legit like I've worked with clients that they work 3 jobs. And yeah, those 3 days a week, they're working like 3 shifts. Absolutely. They do not have time
Yeah.
to do, like meal prep. But the other days of the week will find time. But yeah, there's some times where someone might not, but they can say it. Like, I don't have time because I'm going to be working 15 hours that day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't. But most people, it's like you pull up your phone and see your screen time. What 6 hours, 8 hours? Like, what is it?
It's disturbing. Like
Yep.
it's crazy how much time and it's funny because I was born in 1975. I didn't have a cell phone until I was like 27 years old. Was my first cell phone. We didn't have computers when I was growing up. I didn't have Wi-Fi when I was growing up. Like, and I always say to my son, my 9-year-old, I'm like, and somehow we survived. Like,
Mm-hmm.
without all this technology that kids now think is just, they expect it. They
Yeah.
expect access to it. It's very normal. It's in schools. I mean, shoot, they started using iPads when he was in kindergarten. And he didn't even have an iPad at home, but he learned how to use. So by the time he got one, he's like, oh, I already know how to use this whole thing. I've been using one at school since kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's priorities. And I think that also connects to what we're willing to invest in. And I know we both see this too, where people say they don't have money to invest in their health. And that's another one that I lump in with not having time. It's priorities, because where are we spending? I mean, I have a friend who spends like $500 a month on Starbucks, which is like mind blowing to me. You know,
Yeah.
well, I don't even drink regular coffee. I drink mushroom coffee that I make at home, but it's interesting. It's that same idea, right? It all comes back to priorities. Like the number one thing we should be investing in is our health. Like to me, there's nothing more important than my health and my family's health. All that other stuff comes next, but our health comes first. So again, I think a lot of what we're facing right now is not understanding how to get our priorities in the right place.
100%.
Yeah.
I liked how you said that, because I've talked with people and literally they're like, I can't afford it. Like the healthy food is going to be expensive. It's not. You can make it super, super affordable.
Totally.
But I'm like, how often do you order DoorDash? Because literally you just said like you keep ordering it. I'm like, okay, cool. So how much is that per week? And they're like, I don't want to look. That's the issue, is like you don't know and you're pretending like the money's just there in my bank account. Next thing you know, like we break it down, it's like you're spending $150 a week on DoorDash and Uber Eats and all this stuff. Like, and now you're complaining about your health. Like, where's your priority? We're going to immediately slash that. That's good. That goes away, and you're going to be meal prepping, and that's going to be
Yeah,
a fraction of that cost.
totally. Yeah. And that's the thing is it is just, truly just looking at, yeah, where you're prioritizing your spending, where you're prioritizing your time. It's all of that. And we see it constantly. Yeah. We have those conversations a lot with people. And I also say, what's the cost of being sick? I
Right.
mean, it's expensive. Like I talked to a guy the other day, a potential client who he's rattling off what he's paying for prescriptions, what he's paying for co-pays for all of his doctor's visits. He has diabetes and all this stuff going on. And it's crazy how much he's spending on all that. And I said, so basically right now your priority is to invest your money in your sickness, when instead
Mhm.
you could be investing in your health so you wouldn't need any of that anymore, and we're only getting, I mean, not to say this all gloom and doomy, but we're only getting older. And at what point, we see our clients range right now from 26 years old to 81.
Okay.
And I can tell you, having the clients that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, they would love to get in front of the people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s and be like, don't wait to be, we have an 81-year-old client on dialysis. We have people in their 70s struggling with diabetes. At some point, the shift has to happen. What are you waiting for? That's always my question. And I don't mean it as a smart ass. I'm being legit. Like, what are you waiting for? What's going to be the thing that's going to finally, and unfortunately for most people, it's some scary moment when life stares them in the face, right? Like someone I'm close to just died from diabetes, or I just got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, or I just found out, I have high cholesterol and high blood pressure, whatever it is. It's always something like horrible that like gets
Yeah.
us to think about our health, instead of, I just want to feel good and I want to live my best life and I want to teach that to my kids, and I want to break the cycle, that I grew
Yes.
up in. I grew up in a processed food cycle and with a family riddled with diabetes and obesity that still is riddled with diabetes and obesity. I want to break the cycle so that my kids and my kids' kids don't grow up that way.
Um, Definitely, I find a lot of people, they come to us when they've hit rock bottom. Like,
Yeah.
I wish you reached out a year ago,
Yeah.
because when it'd been so much easier. But you're here now, so we'll work with you and get you to where you need to be. But a lot of times it's you hit rock bottom, and then people are like, now I need to make change. Like, why didn't you do this? There's also a lot of people think I'll take care of this in the future when life is less stressful. And I don't know who goes through life other than when you retire and you have less stress. But you're gonna wait till retirement, because my responsibilities add each year. Like I take on more and more. Like
Amen. Yeah.
man, should we have bought this house or keep renting? Because we've had a ton of stress buying this house.
Totally. I thought I was stressed when I was like in my 20s. And now that I'm 48, I'm like,
That
man, I
was
would love to
nothing,
go back to the stress
right?
I had in my 20s,
When you're in college and you're like, oh my God, this is so stressful. And you're like, dude, you have like 8 hours of free time every single day or more. Like, come on, that wasn't. Now it's like, Man, I had so much free time. That was so not stressful. But that's reality. People think in the future, like when I can focus on me more, I will, when I have time, I will then focus on my health. Like that's never going to happen.
Mm-mm. No, I totally agree. I agree with you. I mean, things just get crazier. You become a homeowner, or you have children, and then you think, okay, my children are getting to the age where they're going to leave the house, which my daughter never will. She'll be with us forever. But then your parents start to age, and then you have to start to help care for your aging parents. I mean, yeah, life does not get less stressful as we get older. We take on, you're right, we take on more, not less. And so I would be the one, and I think you agree, the time is always now.
Yep.
I don't care what your circumstances, I don't care what you throw at me that you're dealing with. I will still tell you the same thing, that the answer is now. And for anybody, we're talking about our health and wellness. To me, every person I talk to, I have a sense of urgency, because it's every day they don't address their health, things get worse, and it's less likely they're going to make change. So to me, every single person is like an emergent situation. Like, all right, sense of urgency. We got to get this going right now, because
Yes,
that's the only way we change, is we got to start.
exactly. Okay. I want to real quick, because we're running out of time a little bit, but real quick, I want to circle back to what we said at the beginning
Yeah.
of adding organ meats into the diet. So I'm a huge
Mhm.
fan of this. I don't really push this on my clients, where most of my clients are like 50 pounds or less. So not quite like yours, towards more like the end, it sounds
Yeah.
like. So that's where I kind of start working. So with me, I kind of take them through, and towards the end of their program, I start working the stuff into their diet. But what are the benefits of adding organ meats?
Oh, man, organ meats. There are things that you get in organ meats at a level you cannot get in other foods. The only thing that can come close is eggs. Eggs come close on a few things. Vitamin A is an example. Um, Choline, vitamin D. There's some things you just cannot mimic them. Like liver. Liver is the most nutrient dense food on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
period. I mean, there's no way around it. It is the most nutrient dense food. And when I say nutrient dense, I mean, when you compare it to even just regular protein, the difference that it has as far as how much more of nutrients it has is 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 fold of what you
Yep.
get. And ancestrally, we ate nose to tail. We didn't waste any part of the animal. We used the hide. You can appreciate. I'm sure you appreciate these things as a hunter,
Yes.
right? You use the hide of the animal. They would use the bones of the animal. You use all the connective tissues. Everything is eaten. Everything is consumed or used in some way. And now we don't. We just go for like all the prime cuts off the animal, right? But that it's crucial. And for a lot of people, organ meats, they're just never gonna, if they didn't grow up eating them, they're not going to be down with the taste. They're not going to be down. But there's a couple of supplements that we recommend that are super high quality, where you can get grass fed, like really great quality organ meats that have been dehydrated and put into capsules. So you can
Yep.
get a lot of benefit. There's a couple of really great, brands out there that do that. And that's something I give that to my kids. My kids take, I'm looking
Nice.
around to see if any of them are listening, because they don't know, but that's like one of the ways I sneak that stuff in is in those supplements. And I recommend those to clients all the time. But if they can eat them, there's ways to incorporate them where they're not as noticeable, like you can ground down, liver, heart, and all these things, and you can mix them into ground meat,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't
Yep.
even know they're there. So there's creative ways you can incorporate them. But for us, a big part of it is absolutely the nutrient density. The key to eating healthy is a big part of it is nutrient density, and making sure we're getting enough of all the nutrients that we need. And most people are deficient in something. I mean, it's just because we don't eat enough variety. We don't eat organ meats, all of those things. I'd say vitamin D and omega-3s, fish oils, those are probably the most common deficiencies that we see. But
Right.
we've also seen people that have weird deficiencies in, like, with choline, for example. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
eating eggs or organ meat, you're deficient in choline. You can't get it in quantity from anything else except organ meat and eggs. So and I know there may be some controversy to someone listening to this, but we are meant to eat animal protein. We are meant to eat organ meat. Our bodies, and I'm talking about evolutionarily, regardless of your stance on, the political stance or the human right or the animal rights stance, our bodies thrive when we eat animal protein and organ meats. But I would say the caveat to that is the right quality, and that's why we say, when we say grass-fed, grass-finished, and it's the same with the organ meats, it absolutely makes a difference. People ask me all the time, does it really matter? Yes, it matters. When you look at the fatty acid profile and traditionally raised, I'll just take beef. You take traditionally raised beef, the fatty acid profile can get up to 125 to 1, which is omega-6 to omega-3. That ratio should be between 1 to 1 and 3 to 1. So you can be eating omega-3s till you're blue in the face. You can eat salmon every day. You can take fish oil. But if you're eating all these omega-6s in the form of traditionally raised meat or industrial seed oils, your body's never going to win the inflammation battle.
No.
Because you're feeding it inflammatory food. You're saying, I'm going to consume the stuff that I know is riddled with inflammation, which will then feed the inflammation in my body. And so it does matter. So if you're going to start to introduce organ meats, grass-fed, grass-finished, from grass-fed, grass-finished animals every time is key.
Nice. Yeah. What would you say would be the best organ meat for somebody to start with? Because everyone knows liver. Mm-hmm. However, getting someone to eat liver is, I'm sure you've experienced it. It's not quite the easiest thing to do in the world.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to do liver, that's why I say and actually there's a brand called Force of Nature. I think it's called Force of Nature.
Force of Nature meats with the
and they do an ancestral
blend. Yes.
Yeah, they call it their ancestral blend, and they mixed in organ meats into the ground meat. And I'm telling you, I've fed it to people that have no clue that there's organ meat in it. Like, they don't know. So
you can't tell with it. Yeah,
you can't tell. So that's part of it, is get creative with how you incorporate it. But another one, and I know some people, this will freak them out, but beef tongue. When you cook it down like in an Instapot, it shreds, like it looks like shredded beef, and it tastes amazing. And you throw it in a pressure cooker, shred it down, treat it like shredded beef, like, and we will do like taco lettuce wraps, with it. And of course people are always like, it's tongue. And I don't tell them that till they've eaten it usually. And then I'll be like, hey, by the way.
Underrated meat for sure. It's one of my favorites. Yes. First time I had it, so we try to use all the venison we get, is tried to do as much nose to tail. Like my neighbor's actually part Native American. So I actually give him the hooves he uses for ceremonies. And then I learned this year, like, how to turn, I'm like, why didn't I think of this? Turn the bones into bone meal for our garden. So we're actually like using the full cycle. But the first time I made tongue, it was one of them. I'm like, this is so weird. And then we had it. So like I did the pressure cooker and then sliced it super thin, and then we fried it up super thin. Oh my God. I was like, this is the best thing ever.
It's good. Like, people always think it sounds weird, but I honestly think it's one of the ones you can get in the mix where people don't even realize what it is. And it tastes amazing. And do you ever roast the bones down of the venison and do bone broth?
We do bone broth. So yeah, I do bone broth with almost all the bones that we can get. And then what I'm doing is, after we do the bone broth, then I'm throwing it in the oven or the grill to cook it until you can just like break it apart and then throw that into the garden.
Bone broth is a great addition. Like, if someone's wary about, some of the organ meats, like, bone broth is a great way. Cause again, when we're talking about nose to tail, it's all the amazing stuff that's in those connective tissues and within the bone marrow and oh man, and homemade bone broth to me is always better than store-bought. It's so easy. I mean, like Thanksgiving, or whole turkey carcass, like right off the bat, boom, we immediately start a big old thing of bone broth after Thanksgiving. But you can also, a lot of stores you can buy, like if they have a butcher at the store, or you even have a local butcher that's not part of a grocery store, if you let them know that you want to come in and pick up a bunch of bones, they'll put aside a bunch of bones for you. And I always roast them first, because it pulls out a lot of the nutrients in the bone, but also it has a ton of flavor. So I roast them first, and then I throw them all in my Instapot. And it's a pretty fast, it's really not an arduous process at all. And it's loaded with, like, one of the things about bone broth is it's really high in glycine. And when we're a protein, if you're eating a lot of protein, which our clients do eat a lot of protein, you're getting a lot of methionine, but not the glycine. And again, this is kind of, when we talk about nose to tail, there's a reason our bodies need the balance, right? Like we just talked about omega-3 and omega-6, same with glycine and methionine. They need each other in balance in the body to do what they're supposed to do. So if you start eating bone broth, you're getting an incredibly high amount of glycine, which helps offset the methionine in the actual muscle meat. So all of these things work synergistically, but the problem is I mean, most of us, you know, and obviously not you and me, but most people don't, they're not drinking bone broth. They're not eating the organ meats. Like all of these things are not in the mix. So we don't realize how much that dysregulates in our body because everything is meant to work together and we're not giving our body everything it needs.
Exactly. So for the listener, if you're wondering what methionine and glycine are, they're amino acids.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I should probably say that. Well, and bone broth is loaded with amino acids. I
It
mean, it is,
is.
I mean, holy moly. I mean, it's an incredible source of amino acids. And so, yeah.
Well, for people who like, I'll use like a collagen supplement because certain times of the year, I'm not doing a lot of bone broth. This time of year, I'm not. We usually stock up on a lot because we don't use it. So I'll supplement with a collagen, but
Yeah.
then come fall and winter, I usually don't use as much collagen because we're having bone broth, which is full of collagen.
Yeah.
Um,
We use a lot of collagen too. Yeah. And sometimes I'll recommend it to a client who's like, we had a client that was struggling with healing. Um,
okay, yeah.
and we started having her add because protein is so key to healing in the body and quality protein. And so we started having her add collagen in. She puts it in her coffee in the morning
Mm-hmm. It's
and
basically
adds,
flavorless.
yeah, totally. And it adds this great bump of the amino acids. And amino acids are the building blocks of protein. And so it's awesome. It's awesome for her. And it's really helped. It's been part of her regimen for healing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know my wife's favorite organ meat is heart. So we'll do for anyone listening, heart's probably the thing that's closest to muscle meat. So it's going to be weird when you cut into it, obviously because you're cutting into a heart. But once you like cook it up, we do tacos with it that all the time, just like strips, almost like or fajitas with it, and
Yeah.
you really won't tell a difference.
Yeah, you're right. It
That's a
is. I
great
mean, it's a
way.
muscle. The heart is a
Yeah.
muscle.
It,
Yeah. So I think people, if they could get past like the mental aspect of wrapping their head around it and just try it, they'd be open. And that was actually how it's funny. A lot of things I got exposed to. I had an uncle, my uncle Tookie, he passed away a few years ago, but he was a hunter
mhm.
and he would feed us things all the time. And then afterwards we'd be like, hey, that was rattlesnake. Hey, that was, this, that. And oh yeah. I mean, it was like always something unusual and something in the mix or some organ meat. And it always tasted amazing. And we just didn't know what it was. And it was better to find out afterwards because we were kids.
Yes.
So we didn't freak out about it beforehand, but yeah.
So my wife absolutely despises liver. So the way I get into her is we make pate. Like we look up French recipes and make homemade pate, and then we get it in that way. So it's not all the time because it's
It's a great way
you
to
know
do it.
not necessarily the lowest calorie option in the world, but you can't really tell. And we like pate, so that's a way we do it. If you want a snack each night, you just have a small amount of that.
Totally. There's a lot of ways. And it's just
Yep.
it's just getting people to open their minds a little bit. And usually clients start, and actually usually when we have the clients that like organ meat, they're older because
Yes,
they grew
usually.
up eating liver.
Yeah.
Like we have a client who she regularly eats liver, and all the other clients are like, "Oh my gosh, you're always eating liver." But she's someone who's a little bit older and who grew up eating. I mean, my husband always talks about how they had liver every week. They had liver and onions
That
one
was
night.
my dad, liver and onions, and my mom hated it. So he was like never allowed to have it in the house. So hated it. We never grew up with it. And then it's like later on discover like, oh, it's really good for you. Okay, we should. And then it was, I was probably like 16 at the time. So first time having liver, you're like, oh,
Well, and what's funny is a lot of people think, I don't know if you get this sometimes, but people have this misconception that the liver's full of toxins.
oh
Because
yeah, the
the toxin
filter.
processing, right?
Yeah.
That's how toxins get processed and filtered, but it doesn't store toxins. So whenever people say to me, well, can I really eat it? It's full of toxins. I'm like, it's not full of toxins.
Yeah,
It,
that's
it, it filters them in your body, but it just doesn't store toxins in the liver.
it,
So it's good to mention that for
yeah.
anybody thinking that. Yeah,
It's not an air filter that's like catching everything. It breaks them
exactly.
down. So it's like it comes in and gets broken down right away or
Yes.
shoved back out into the bloodstream for you to
Yes.
excrete. So it's yeah, that one you get a lot. It's like
Yes.
if it is storing toxins, that animal probably didn't make it to the store because it probably died in the field.
Yeah.
Just saying, it probably didn't make it. Um, yeah. So this was awesome. I can't believe it's already past an hour. So We barely touched a lot of topics, but where can people find you?
Yeah. Well, on Instagram, we're at Lifestyle Evolution Coaching. That's a great place just to kind of learn more about what we're about. We have a really great private Facebook group too, where there's a lot of education, which I'm happy to share with you. So you can just share the link when you put the podcast up.
Yep.
Our website's lifestyle-evolution.com. And I'll share my email and my number if anybody wants to reach out. It's Jeanna, Jeanna, at lifestyle-evolution.com. And I love a good old fashioned conversation. So my number, and this is my cell number, is 303-525-5848. You can text me at that number. You can reach out and say you want to have a combo. I love talking to people, and whether you want to work with us or not, if you just want some clarity, if you just want to learn a little bit more about what we do. And again, if you're someone who's got 75 to a few hundred pounds to lose, that's who we serve. That's our passion. And we feel like it's a very underserved population, as far as being served in the right way, right?
Yes.
Being served in a way that's truly healthy. So that's what we do.
Awesome. So you guys will find all that info down in the show notes. So go give Jeanna a follow. I won't put your cell phone number jet down there just in case there's like bots scraping the internet and you don't get a bunch of spam text, but
right.
You can text her, just re-listen to that part, like press like the Spotify back 15 seconds thing.
Yes.
But IG, email, Facebook group will all be down in the show notes.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.